again, the general purpose is to go through the 6-year plan templates and see what questions arise. We identified, a handful of sort of quirks yesterday, and we're compiling those, as well as some questions we've received just directly from the institutions after we sent the instructions out last week. So we are, sort of working on compiling all of those. Some questions are easier to answer than others, but so far haven't really seen any consistent themes. But we're still interested in making sure everyone sees the questions being asked and the answers. So even if you haven't asked them yourself, they might have come across your mind. So just as a quick update on sort of the timing and sort of how we got here, the templates went out last week. This morning, I followed up with the Excel versions of the fact pack. So you have a readable spreadsheet of all the data that is in your fact pack that's in the graphs. Most of that is Chev data, with a handful of census data sprinkled in here and there, some labor market information, but most of it should look familiar. The August meetings have been scheduled. You might see those times change 15 minutes on the front end or the back end, just as we tweak the schedule for the OP6 that week, but don't be alarmed if you see any of the times shift just a little bit. We do have a deadline of July 17th for those initial plans heading into the August meetings. And then, there's a timeline with we owe questions back to you, questions and comments back to the institutions within a month or so. So we might need to change that from September 1 to September 17th. And then final plans due in October to Chev. So a little bit more of sort of how we got here. The OP6 was interested in taking a review of the 6-year plans with a few items and themes in mind. I think number one is sort of making this process actually 6 years. A lot of the data we have was just projecting out 2 years. So I think you'll see that theme throughout. We would project the enrollment levels 6 years and a handful of other things, but not really do the non-general fund revenue or the academic and financial plans going further out. So you'll see that. Also, general interest in from the OP6 to look at specific themes. I think enrollment being one of them, workforce alignment and financial effectiveness. And that sort of reflects the way that the narrative and the fact pack is organized as well. And then generally, I think maybe having a little bit more information on the front end of the conversations around the 6-year plans, which is why you see the fact pack put together in the way it is and put together now, so that it will be not something to respond to individually, but at least will act as a kind of primer for your narrative and for the conversations in August. So that's just a little bit of background about, or reminder about how we got here and where we're going. The last thing I'll say about where we're going, you should expect an email this week from Boston Consulting Group on opportunities for technical assistance sessions. This is a part of their contract between the state and Boston Consulting Group. So they will be reaching out with sort of, a few requests, such as, setting a specific agenda for those technical assistance sessions, and what they aren't, which is, they're not going to be making recommendations for strategy and, how to complete your plan in a strategic way. but it's more of a technical assistance session. So that's something you can expect coming forward. And yes, I definitely want to make this as interactive as possible. That's why we're doing it. So I see David Moore, your hand is up. Do you want to ask a question? David Moore, can you hear me? I learned yesterday I can lower people's hands. So, but David, maybe you could hit the chat too if something you wanted to add later on. So, okay, I'm going to, well, before I share my screen and dive into the Excel template and walk through that, any questions or comments before we jump in? Okay, cool.
Tom, could I ask a question?
Sure.
Just about the meetings, the in-person meetings. Mm-hmm. Are we going to get any, usually we just prepare and go and talk and OP6 ask questions, but can we anticipate any kind of agenda or maybe particular things that the OP6 is interested in talking to us as an individual institution about, given the submission?
Yes, Colette, that's a great question, and I think ahead of the meetings, we will be able to share with each institution what a particular area of focus will be with that institution. So everyone got the same fact pack, right? With enrollment trends and financials and everything, and some of those, just some of those charts are not going to be as relevant to some institutions. So yes, I think I'm not completely sure what it's going to look like yet, but it might just be a reference or a citation to a specific page on your fact pack that a member of OP6 has flagged, or a member of the Chev team or the BCG team that we think should be a focus of the conversation and something to expect to touch upon. That said, I mean, again, I think you should roughly be familiar with each of the charts in your fact pack, or have a rough idea of what they say, and maybe some alternative ways to look at it, or some details that or nuance that are missed by that. But yeah, we will definitely provide some sort of communication on these are the items and the trends that OP6 would like to focus on.
And how far in advance will you supply that?
That's a good question. Again, I don't know for sure. I would expect around a week or two before your meeting. Right. And there are opportunities in the Excel template to provide additional data that you think might tell your story a little bit better. That's sort of at the end of the template, and it's in the enrollment. So excuse me, the narrative section, where at the end, optional, provide additional data or information you think are relevant. Any other questions before we jump in?
Hey, Tom, This is Diane Stamp from JMU. Related to the presentations or the meetings in Richmond in August, are you expecting that in the past we've had a PowerPoint presentation? Are you expecting it's more of a conversation, or that we put together a PowerPoint presentation and what that looks like?
Dan, that's another good question. From some of the conversations I've heard from OP6, I think yes, there will still be an opportunity to kick off the meeting with a presentation, but there will be I think an interest in getting to those sort of big topics and getting into the content of your plan maybe a little bit quicker than we have in the past. And I know that varies, and but I think yes, you'll still have that sort of kickoff, maybe the first 30 minutes of the meeting. But like I said, the OP6 is interested in getting to the things they've identified a little bit quicker. Just making a quick note of that. Okay. Am I successfully sharing my screen right now? Everyone see the Excel? Great. So this is all in your inboxes. You know, once again, in the 6-year plans, we've got 2 parts, an Excel and a narrative. This first tab is, you know, the instructions by section. Just point out, you know, maybe a few formatting changes. If you see a shaded cell, that generally contains formulas. And so, you know, is not necessary for you to change. I mentioned that some things are going 6 years out, and we'll get into the details of that because there's some sticking points on whether we're talking about the revenue or the expenditures or the pro forma or the assumptions, but we'll get into the specifics there. But essentially, this first page is just the instructions, but we're going to get into those specifically here. We've also got our, you know, specific contacts for questions here. And then we've also got our the actual code that creates this whole process to begin with. Second tab, institution ID. You know, this really hasn't changed at all from last year. Just institution name, the unit ID, and then the individual or individuals responsible for the plan. We had a few questions about this yesterday, about sort of who is best, the best contact here. I mean, generally it's been the chief financial officer or, you know, vice president of finance at each institution, but it does vary. Sometimes it is the chief academic officer, and in a few cases it's even the president. But I think generally it's the person that's most responsible for the plan. Questions there? Okay, moving on to part 1 or tab 1, the undergraduate tuition and fees. This hasn't changed too much from previous years. We have added the out-of-state undergraduate tuition and fees, both E&G and non-E&G. The plan charge, and then you see the grayed out is the formula for a percent increase. We recognize the impact of the budget. You know, there's close to a $300 million swing in E&G operating funds that could be added to the FY24 budget. We know we don't have it yet. We know that's going to impact you. And, you know, in our concurrent process of the tuition and fees report and that collection that that Yan's been leading, you know, we know that there are some, you guys have been submitting tuition and fees with caveats over, you know, if the budget comes back a certain way, then we might make changes to our tuition and fee charges. And then generally you'll see this through the document. If there are changes to the budget, then we'll have to go back to OP6 and see what their instructions are for changing different parts of the template, but we kind of have to cross that bridge when we get there. Question about tuition and fees. Okay, moving on to tab 2, revenue. Once again, as in previous years, we are asking institutions to submit their total collected revenue, actual and estimated for, you know, the 23 and 24 fiscal years, and then the total projected revenue for 25 and 26, assuming no new general fund. So, you know, what's been passed is the baseline. I should also note, as in previous years, but there's always confusion over this, we're asking for the total collected revenue or the projected revenue after discounts and waivers. So that is, funds that essentially have to hit your books. This would not include, and that is distinct from tuition revenue used for financial aid. So tuition revenue you do actually collect, and then you go around and you go ahead and apply that for scholarships for students. That is distinct from this, and is largely captured in tab 3 on financial aid. So again, this is revenue actually collected or projected to actually be collected. As I mentioned, we are looking further out in the pro forma. It's kind of a term we're using for the rough modeling of years 4 through 6 of the plan. And if you can see the instructions here, it is instructing you to hold tuition and fees constant at the 2025-26 rate. And so the changes in your non-general fund revenue should really just come from your enrollment projections. And not changing the tuition and fee rate. Now this matters just because we get into the pro forma when we can start, there's a calculator that allows us to look at general fund share versus additional revenue raised from tuition and fees to pay for certain things that are assumed in the plan. And there's no hard and fast formula here that ties your enrollment projections to that 2026 rate, but the instructions nevertheless are asking you to just look at your change in revenue based on your enrollment projections. Again, for years 3, 4, 5, and 6. Questions about that? Some additional changes, we do have the lines 24 and 25 here. So, total line 25, E&G general fund revenue. So asking to plug that in here in B25 and C25, and then assuming that's going to be flat moving out. And these formulas do just that. So you can see the FY25 general fund revenue that's linked to C25 for FY24 and so on the out years. And all of this feeds, particularly everything on years 3, 4, 5, and 6 feed into the pro forma tab, which we're building towards. Questions? Yan, is there anything you'd like to add?
No, you have covered all. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, tab 3, financial aid. This tab has really only changed in 2 relatively straightforward ways. First, we've added just a quick formula on implied discount rate right here in column I, and then we've gone further out again in that pro forma out to fiscal year 2030. So for folks that are newer, this sheet starts with the total tuition revenue. Again, that's a linked cell going back to the previous revenue tab. And then we ask for tuition revenue used for financial aid here in column C. And then, that can, we also collect unfunded scholarships, other tuition discounts and waivers. And a lot of this just builds towards the implied discount rate, which I mentioned earlier, which we have done sort of ad hoc in the past, but this just sort of formalizes it. And then this test right here with the state requirement that in-state tuition revenue doesn't subsidize out-of-state students. And that's what this formula and if-and statement, or this if statement right here does. But that has not changed from previous years. Any questions about that? Okay. Moving forward to tab 4, the academic and financial plan. So for folks that have been doing this for a few years, this has some significant changes in it. First and foremost, we have combined the academic and financial plan, which were previously parts 3A and 3B. So they're now combined into one sheet. We have added a few of these boxes here about estimating the total E&G expenditures for FY23 and 24. Later on, that also feeds into the pro forma, I believe, in terms of being the base, and that also builds into the implied general fund share. Again, I think it's more relevant getting over into the pro forma tab, which we'll get into, which we're building towards. But handful of things here. So I think we have, if you scroll down, just right now, just looking at the first 2 years, because things get a little different in years 3, 4, 5, and 6. We ask the institutions to add in the cost of salary increases by by different employee categories. We have some of the inflationary non-personnel costs, utilities, things you've seen before, opportunities to add lines and descriptions here. Got the financial aid category, and other academic and support strategies and initiatives. This would start basically starting right here on 32 is what would be the academic plan. So new programs, hiring additional faculty, hiring counselors to improve graduation rates, all the sort of different things that OPSEX is looking to see for how you just the sort of initiatives and strategies you plan to move forward in the future. So again, these have basically been combined. I'll point out that where things get a little different here is we do have an assumption of a 2% salary increase per year for the next 6 years, with the typical general fund support that you can see over in tab 4B, the general fund share. In addition to that assumed 2% salary increase, we also have a 3% health insurance increase and a 5.36% VITA cost increase. And if you're curious where those come from, those essentially are coming from the governor's 6-year plan. So the governor in December submitted a 6-year plan that included a number of spending and tax priorities, but also included these rate increases of 2% salary increases. So if you look in the sheet, we've got an opportunity for amount from general fund. Even though the assumption is no new general fund, this is the exception. There is an assumption that there will be new general fund based on these salary increases, health insurance increases, and VITA cost increases. So the general fund will support those increases. So when we get down here, the box gets grayed out. That's because we're going back to assume no new general fund. Now, it's possible that you want to increase faculty salaries, beyond that 2%, and that'll be an opportunity to add lines and descriptions here. But once again, that would not come with any assumed additional general fund. The state is going to pick up their share of the 2% salary increase and the other non-personnel costs that are there. I see a hand raised. VCU guest.
Yeah. Hey, Tom, it's David Allen over here at VCU.
Hey,
just
David.
looking through this again. So can you talk a little bit more about the financial aid category on this tab and exactly how does, because I think we capture, at least in years past, we've captured most of the financial aid cost in the financial aid tab 3 and then in the undergraduate tuition fees as far as like waivers and stuff go in that. What kind of additional costs are you looking to see in this tab that won't necessarily be in the other 2 tabs?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at it, and then I might have to phone a friend. I think generally tab 3, is looking for the compliance with the prohibition of out-of-state students, being subsidized by in-state students, and generally sort of looking at the discount rates and things like that. And sort of what the plans are, using your own resources to address affordability. Whereas the academic and financial tab is looking to sum all of the additional expenditures in a way that impacts your sort of modeled budget moving forward. So I think in my mind they sort of have 2 different purposes, but again I'll see if Yan has any additional comments here.
Yeah, I think Tom summarized basically correctly. And as far as I understand, these lines are more in terms of whether institutions plan to use more tuition revenues for financial aid. And so, yeah, it's kind of the same as tab 3, that column for tuition revenue for financial aid, but this is more in terms of spending because this sheet is collecting institutions' total spending, the incremental spending in these years. So the purposes are different.
Does that help, David?
Yeah, it does. And I just wanted to make sure too that the financial aid tab, whatever we put in tab 3, that increase in spending that we'll have over time does not financially get picked up in tab 4 or tab 5. Is that correct? Because I don't want to necessarily double count things.
Not directly, yeah. There are no links in the pro forma back to the tab 3. They're not linked. Maybe they should be, though. I mean, we're always looking for ways to sort of streamline and consolidate. But of course, these are, a lot of this is the totals, and as Yan mentioned, here is sort of the incremental and the marginal.
Right. So then, in any growth that you see in the financial aid tab 3, you would expect to also see the corresponding amount in tab 4, since that's going to represent an increase in spending.
Theoretically, I think it should work that way. Yes.
Okay.
So yeah, the difference between, let's say, I'm not even sure which one, if we even have a sum, but let's say, yeah, I mean, the differences here between 24 and 25, the totals for tuition revenue for aid. Yeah, I think whatever the difference is between those, we might want to see match up over here in tab 4 at the appropriate spot. But it's not physically linked at this time. This is probably a good time to point out column Q, explanation or notes. We're not looking for any theses here, but it's probably a good opportunity to add in some of the explanations. I think particularly when we're looking at salary increases above that 2%, we'll want to see just a quick explanation of, yeah, we're going to do it 4%, then 5%, whatever it is. But this is always an opportunity to explain a little bit more particularly in case we missed ways to think about this and to fully explain what's going on. Lastly, I just want to point out, this is kind of the main error we've identified so far. It doesn't impact the institutions as much, but this calculator right here at the bottom of tab 4, which is supposed to see whether or not you're raising enough tuition revenue to pay for your expenditure plan, your finance plan. We have an error in the formula here. As you can see, it's pulling H50, which is the amount from general fund. It should be pulling the amount from tuition revenue, but you guys don't have to actually fill that in. We can fix it on our side. But I did want to point that out and just thank Adam Hinken from ODU who flagged that for us. So. Generally, I also should have noted just a point of gratitude and thanks to everyone that's participated in these meetings. In addition to some of the conceptual and directional and philosophical feedback we've gotten that I think has been incorporated, there's been some real specific things too that have been adjusted and improved thanks to your feedback. One of which is this is it for the finance collections. You might recall a couple weeks ago we had a tab on collecting additional expenditures by subcategory and collecting positions, FTE personnel by subcategory. So those are no longer a part of the plan. So I just wanted to point that out as evidence of your feedback being incorporated. Any other questions about these assumptions? Because this was kind of it's a tricky assumption, but I mean I think it makes sense. The governor's 6-year budget calls for this 2% salary increase along the same cost share, so we're trying to hold to that and make this a real plan. But I know it's a little tricky with general fund share for that, but then not for these other pieces that are grayed out.
So Tom, just to clarify, are you going to fix this formula and then send a corrected worksheet for us?
We have not decided that yet, Colette. I guess I was kind of waiting on finding some more mistakes before doing it.
Yeah.
So I would only have to do it once.
Right, okay.
And I'm kind of on the fence of whether this mistake's big enough for me to do that, considering it's really for reviewer purposes. And not for, it's not.
Those of us who are putting it together, though, would like the result of that box, right? Just so we know where we are.
Yeah, so fair enough.
We're going to have to fix it ourselves if you don't fix it.
True. Yes,
right.
Point taken. Point taken. So I'm still going to say I'm going to wait to see if I find any other errors, so I only have to send it once.
Got it.
Tom, I'm going to ask this is Deb Dickinson. I'm going to ask a somewhat dense question just because we've got some other challenges at Mason. It looks like it's got the additional funding needed. We have shortfalls and we're trying to work through that, but I believe it's letting you drop that out if you do, and then that'd be something we'd have to address.
Which cell are you talking about?
Just in overall, and the P&L, just at the bottom, drops out. We potentially will have a shortfall that we don't know how we're going to solve yet.
I gotcha.
And it's part of our funding need, our funding disparity. Right. And I also, in the expenses, thinking of unfunded mandates, I guess we could add those as potential expense lines, like VMS dependent, and just put those in.
Yeah, I think we had a specific note about VIM's dep elsewhere, but
Okay.
I mean, essentially here we're talking about the expenditures. Oh, sorry, I got a little bit of feedback. There is the general fund requests tab to fill in some things, but Yan, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, Deb, I think, yeah, you just insert lines if you need to reduce the spending and provide the lines and the reason. I think last year, there were one institution did this kind of reduction.
Any other questions or comments? I know a lot are gonna come up in the pro forma section for sure, but.
Sorry, this is Dave from VCU. I want to piggyback on the VMESDEP point. Since that's a waiver, won't that show up as a suppression to your revenue tab when we're doing tuition?
Yes, as a waiver, it would show up it's kind of the counterfactual. It would not show up in your tuition revenue collected.
And
right.
I think, yeah, and that's a great point that Deb made as well, just because I think that's in years past. I mean, VCU, that's a pretty large cost for us, as I think it is also for a lot of other people. Last year, we highlighted it as one of our general fund requests, I think, in the 6-year plan. And I'm assuming that that's probably likely something that we'll do going into this next year, just because, yeah, there really is nowhere that gets teased out to show the large increase in costs than anywhere else. And I feel like if we don't include it on the revenue tab and try and put it on the expense one, then that's going to throw out of whack our tuition one. So we definitely want to highlight it, but I think that is kind of a similar question that we had in terms of how exactly do we do that?
Yeah, I mean, I know Chev recommended, a VMSDEP appropriation, in our budget recommendations last year, and I expect to see them again this year. So, we hear you on that. In terms of whether it's collected or not, does anyone know, would it be in other tuition discounts and waivers here in tab 3, column G? Does anyone know if that's where it would be?
Unfunded. Yeah, I think that's what the instructions say, right?
I'm not sure because these two columns are supposed to come from Chev S1, S2. I know S1, S2 submitted by the institution's financial aid office, not from the budget office. And that's many categories of different kinds of discounts and waivers. So, I mean, this is just one number, one line by student level and DOMSA, but S1, S2 has many categories as far as I know. So I'm not sure if you have to increase because of the enrollment decline and you have to do more those kind of waivers or discounts, how you're going to handle that, frankly.
But aren't these instructions telling you to put all the waivers, regardless of who they're for, in that column?
Yes. Yeah, and VMSDEP and the senior citizens waiver are included as examples.
Right.
And I mean, Yan's point, yeah, I mean, this is still, the institutions do submit this, though we are looking to see how it matches up with S1, S2. But I think the point about VMSDEP is totally taken. Again, we hear you. Please, include it in the general fund requests tab, and we'll do everything we can to make sure that that's heard. But it's not looking. It wasn't in the either Chambers's 24 budget. It wasn't in the House or Senate's budget, I don't believe. So it would be probably an issue for next biennium. which is what this whole thing's all about, 6-year plans. Okay. I'm going to move us along, but definitely I really appreciate all the comments and questions, and so keep them coming. Part 4B is essentially a reference tab. These are the general fund share based on the FY22 base adequacy calculation. So if you have your costs of your additional 2% salary increase, and then the health insurance and Vita costs, this is your general fund share right here. We had a few questions in the last webinar about that methodology, and I think it was folks that haven't been around as long. So I think we'll try to figure out a way to at least have a little bit of documentation. I know we had a council agenda item a couple years ago on base adequacy. Of course, it's covered some in the cost study report, and Yan, is the state expert on that. But there's a couple different ways that we can provide some additional documentation if people are interested. Okay. Moving on to tab 5, the 6-year pro forma. So this is a new tab that we haven't done before. And it really doesn't have anything that you need to submit into, though. Colette, to your earlier point, I know you'll be interested in it and sort of what it pulls in. But it does have linked cells to the previous tabs. Total E&G general fund revenue pulls from the revenue tab. Say discount rate comes from the financial aid tab. That's mainly just for a reference, I believe. We've got E&G non-general fund revenue here, the incremental total E&G revenue summing the NGF and GF, the implied percent of general fund as a percent of E&G, the total E&G expenditures sums the additional expenditures from the total from the academic and financial plan tab 4, and then we have the incremental amount. So with the assumption of or the projected non-general fund revenue and the projected general fund revenue, which is flat after 2026, and then the non-general fund, those changes are just based on your enrollment projections. Again, not hard and fast. It's not a link of rate times quantity, but that's what the instructions say. That produces a pro forma surplus and deficit. And Deb, to your point about existing deficits, I'd have to think about whether that would get plugged in here. I think it might, and then we're looking at the incremental surplus deficit, so just how it's changed, and then that moves out through the years. What's changed here a bit since we last previewed this with the FAC, previously we had these extreme scenarios of assume that deficit is 100% paid for through tuition revenue, 100% paid for through general fund, or 100% paid for through reallocation. We've sort of changed that now to where it's just a calculator and you can plug in the percentages how you want. And then those rates then feed into what the implied E&G expenditure reduction would be, or reallocation, the implied tuition and fee increase, and the implied general fund increase. So essentially these 3 numbers right here, you can turn it in as all zeros. You can turn it in at 0.33%, a third, for all three. It's really up to you, but there really shouldn't be anything that you need to submit on this tab. So that hopefully is the good news. And it might help you think about your future plans, looking at those percentage rates. Yan or maybe Jeff, anything you would add here?
Yan, do you want to go ahead? Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Jeff.
Okay. No, I mean, I think just to emphasize, this tab is not a projection. This is not. This is fundamentally different than the 2-year exercise, which is really a projection and a plan and a budget request. This is it's a pro forma. It's a thought exercise, modeling exercise to just take effectively your expenditures and your enrollment, right, which you projected out in your enrollment projections, your expenditures, which you're projecting out in the earlier tab, and just to see what sort of the implications of that long term. And this is intended to be a sort of directional exercise, not a precise exercise, to just get a sense of, presumably for most institutions, I guess I should say this explicitly. For most institutions, I assume there's going to be a deficit. If you can't raise tuition for 6 years, but expenditures are for 4 years, but your expenditures are going up, and general fund is not, right? Presumably there will be a deficit. So having a deficit is not inherently something bad in this case. It's a question of whether the deficit seems reasonable. Does it seem like something that can reasonably be accounted for through a reasonable mix of those 3 levers? Or does it feel like one of those levers has to be completely out of whack in order for the deficit to be covered? So that's really what I would be thinking about when looking at what this tab is saying. And that's what the calculator at the bottom is for, is just to sort of play around with the numbers and say, okay, do I need to type in something crazy? Do I need to have some sort of crazy tuition increase or crazy expense cut or crazy general fund increase in order to make these numbers work out? Or does it feel like a reasonable combination of those 3 things can work to cover the deficit?
Thanks, Jeff. Just so everyone know, Jeff Keterman from Boston Consulting Group, and you'll be hearing a little bit more from him later, in case folks haven't met him yet. Okay. Well, if you have more questions about it, we have, about 40 minutes left in this session. So if it comes back up again, that's fine. But for now, I'm going to move us along. General fund requests. This has not changed considerably from previous years. This does just go out to 25 and 26. We do want the strategies here to match up to the academic and financial plan. That way, we can get an idea of we want the total amount to match also to the academic and financial plan and the general fund support. These could be the same. You could be asking for 100% of the cost of an initiative, or a portion. And then the notes section, I know folks have utilized a lot in the past as well. We do have some drop-down options for categories. That's something that Chev did on the back end in terms of analyzing. Yeah, Evan is smiling. When he was a Virginia Management Fellow, he had the tough task of categorizing some of the general fund requests. Well, now these over at Senate Finance, he'll be able to use these drop-down menus in the analysis if you help out in that way. So we just ask you just to do your best to categorize the requests, and if it's something we don't have, then we've got another, and you can specify in the notes section over here.
Tom, a small point, but I think shouldn't the instructions be referencing part 4 because you relabeled the parts of the plan,
Yes.
right? Okay.
Thank you, Colette. Yeah, use the same title used in part 4 instead of
4.
part 3 right here.
Yeah.
And its connection to part 5. Yeah, we'll get into that. Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Hey, this is Jeff. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Jeff.
I was going to say, so just two notes on this tab that actually we didn't mention yesterday and probably should have. So one is that the general fund requests on this tab do not flow into the pro forma, which is why this tab comes after it. So the pro forma is just based on sort of expenditure trajectories on kind of natural, either inflationary or otherwise things that are kind of baked into the plan. This is for sort of additional requests above and beyond that. And obviously it's not a baseline assumption that these requests will be filled, or at least not all of them. And so this does not flow into that plan. So any sort of general fund increase implied by your 6-year pro forma, these requests would be on top of that. And so keep that in mind when filling everything out. And the other is just, there's a notes column to put in, ideally no more than like a sentence or a bullet about each request. But I think particularly on this column, on this tab, I think there is still an expectation that somewhere in your narrative, there's some more explanation for each of these. And we can talk about where that might be. I think it might be kind of spread throughout. And so if you could reference which question is relevant, that would be helpful. And then there is, I can't remember which letter, but there is also a question that's just like other budget requests. And so if something does not fit in anywhere else, that would be where you would include it. Just if you could do your best to try to make the connection clear so optics can connect to that.
Thanks, Jeff. Any other questions or comments? Good deal. So that's part 1. Going to move on here to part 2. There we go. So the narrative has seen, I think, more significant changes. As we mentioned at the top of the meeting, we see the fact pack as being a primer for the narrative, and it's not something you have to respond to individually. We are asking that the answers here be relatively short, even bullet points. So because we recognize that there are a lot of additional questions. We did our best to trim a few as well compared to previous years, but really just we cannot emphasize this enough that being concise as possible with your responses is requested. And again, even bullet points, I think I will be accepted. And if it says optional, we have some optional questions here at the end. That really means optional. It's not like you're not going to get full credit if you don't do it. But we did want to have a few of these to highlight, any priorities, programs, key areas that haven't been covered elsewhere in the narrative. Same with existing initiatives, collaboration, additional context, supporting materials, requests to state policy changes, also optional, but as you see fit, that's the place there. So again, we do see this reflecting the organization of the fact pack in the 3 main sections. Yeah, I'd say just generally, you know, a lot of these questions can be summarized as, you know, sort of what, at least getting into the main sections of the fact pack. There's just some themes around, you know, what are the primary drivers of the trends that you see in the fact pack? What is your strategy moving forward, and what are the resource implications for those strategies? So that they vary a little bit more than that, but those are generally sort of the themes that we see. Questions about the narrative? Okey-doke. We received a few questions about, you know, how to make sure that your plans are aligned with the right strategic planning document, such as the goals articulated in Pathways to Opportunity, TJ21, and the governor's objectives. So that's been a frequently asked question that we can add. The Pathways to Opportunity goals are in the Excel instructions, but we can provide that annual report. And the governor's objectives look like this document. I got to check to see if I have the latest pinned up in my bulletin board. But those, I share those because that's something that's come up already, and we're, you know, be happy to provide those to make sure that we're all looking at the same strategic documents. Any other questions or comments about the narrative? Okay. Jeff, did you want to share a little bit about what's next with the technical assistance sessions, or is there anything else you'd like to add around the narrative?
I think you captured the narrative. Just want to emphasize, because this question came up yesterday, the fact pack is meant to be, number one, a support for your planning. Number two, sort of context for your answers to the questions. And number three, sort of a signal of what Op6 is looking at. And so if you're seeing something, Op6 will probably see it too. And if it seems like it warrants a conversation, it might. And you might want to try to capture it in one of your questions. If it feels like it doesn't fit anywhere, there is an optional question at the very end for any additional information that didn't quite fit in any of the other sections. You're not expected, required, and nobody's looking for a sort of line by line, page by page reaction or response to the fact pack. So please don't feel like, in addition to the Excel and the Word, you also have to respond to the fact pack. It's meant just to serve as a basis of the conversation, not to be a conversation unto itself. If you have any issues or challenges or questions, the fact pack, with the Excel, with anything else, your contacts continue to be Chef. They will pull in BCG as much as necessary. Please direct those questions. We have a few, we've already gotten a few questions around sort of expenditure data from Cardinal, and maybe had some anomalies or discrepancies. If anything like that comes up, please reach out to Tom and Yan. The technical assistance sessions are meant to provide an opportunity to institutions for thought partnership with BCG partners and senior advisors who've been sort of working with institutions of higher education across a range of states for many, many years in a variety of roles, including some that have been in the seats in institutions. And so the way that'll work is you all will get an email from me probably in the next day or so with some information, and then I will be your point of contact to submit a request to have one or more conversations. So the assistance is in the form of conversations. I think later on down the road, it could also be in the form of, hey, can you read this and let me know what you think? But it is meant not for VCG, with this level of engagement to sort of start making strategic recommendations to your institution. We're not deep enough in any sort of deep enough position to do so. We don't really have capacity to sort of do ad hoc follow-on analysis. It is for us to be thought partners with you as you reflect on your data, as you reflect on your plans, as you reflect on your questions and your answers to those questions. We can do it sort of at the beginning, as you're just starting to think about it. We can do it more towards the end, as you have preliminary ideas that you want to bounce off someone. We are available to do that. And again, I am the contact for that, and I'll help connect each institution with the appropriate advisor and set up a session. And I guess the only thing I would request is once you get the email, think about it, try to get back to me relatively soon with some idea of whether or not, or the extent to which you intend to want to find time to talk to us, just so that we can have an ability to sort of load balance and plan accordingly. Just want to avoid everyone emailing us on like July 10th, frantically hoping for a last minute session. So if you could give me sort of a heads up as soon as you know, doesn't have to be immediately, but that would be super helpful. Even if you don't think you're going to want to talk to us for a month, that's totally fine. But easier if we know now, so we can plan accordingly.
Any questions for Jeff about these technical assistance sessions? Any questions or comments about the 6-year plan process in general? Okie doke. Well, this meeting was recorded. We'll throw it up on the YouTube and distribute that. We've got a few little changes. I think Colette, thanks to both those technical changes, we are definitely going to send an updated Excel version out there. Other than that, our lines of communication are open. If you have any questions or comments for us, just let us know. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, Tom.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay, so that one was there and there, there.